Hello, folks, and welcome back. You're listening to another episode of Dying with Diabetes in America. I'm Mike Rilhe, joined with my co-host, as always, Miss Michelle Devine Robinson. And today we have a very special guest. She is not only a motivational speaker, she's also a best-selling author, and she's a host of her own podcast called Your Diabetes Breakthrough with Tracy Herbert. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Miss Tracy Herbert. Hi, Tracy.
Hey, it's so good to be here.
Oh,
wonderful to have you.
I gotta tell you, well, we've only been doing I think this is our fourth episode now. So we're doing slowly but surely. But when Michelle's been booking guests, we've had guests coming on, sharing their story, and I'm just very impressed and amazed at everything people have overcome and accomplished. But when she gave me your name and I started looking into your story, wow, just the stuff you've done. I mean, you've ridden your bike cross country, and
3,527 miles, mind you.
And
27 miles.
Yep.
And what was the reason behind that bike ride, Tracy?
Okay, well, let's go back to 1978.
Okay.
I was 17 years old. I was literally fighting for my life, lying in ICU, like so many people with type 1 diabetes. Back then it was called juvenile diabetes. When they finally diagnosed me, they weren't sure I was going to live. And the doctor literally walks into the ICU and he puts his hands on his hips and he says, "Young lady, you've got juvenile diabetes. You're going to be dead in 20 years. You're going to die with horrible complications. You will go blind. You're going to have your legs amputated. You're going to have to go on dialysis. You're never going to be able to have children." And as he was turning around and walking away, he says, "Oh, and you got to learn to give yourself shots several times a day because there's not a cure." And he left the room.
Now, see, that's that 1978 bedside doctor, you know.
And 1999. It didn't get better with
And
time.
2020, that's the HMO doctor right there. But 1978, that was pretty standard doctoring. Like, here's the blunt, honest truth. This is my bedside manner. I'm out. So you were how old? You were 17?
I was 17. They told my parents, don't even waste I was a senior in high school. Don't even waste your money sending her to college because you're not going to have a good return on investment.
Oh my God.
I know. Luckily, my parents didn't listen to that because it was the craziest thing. So I was in the hospital for about 2 weeks. I think it was 2 weeks and 1 day. And I was going to all the training that everybody with diabetes goes through. And I'm looking at all these horrible pictures, seeing everything. And we didn't have diabetes educators, at least back then in the hospital where I was. But everybody kept telling me the same thing. You're going to be dead in 20 years. You're going to die with horrible complications. I mean, the exact same thing over and over again. Well, I laying in bed kind of as a smart aleck 17-year-old kid going, I'm going to show you. So I didn't know what I did. I learned how to give myself a shot using an orange, which I'm assuming they probably still do today.
Oh my gosh,
is that right,
they
Michelle?
Totally do. Yeah, they absolutely do. It's how I learned how to give my first needle too. So
okay. So that before I could leave the hospital, I had to give myself a shot in the stomach. That was a requirement for some weird reason. I don't know. And I'm almost 6 foot tall. I'm 5'11" ¾ And I was at that height when I was diagnosed, but I weighed about 120 pounds because I had lost so much weight. And I had no fat at all in my stomach. And I gave myself that shot. Then I started saying, I know why rabies shots hurt so bad. I mean, because back in the day, the needles were pretty
huge.
Good size. I mean, yeah.
They were gauges that we don't see at all today anymore.
Yes.
Thankfully. And there was no thin or fine, ultra fine.
No. And matter of fact, at the hospital where I was, they showed me how to boil syringes. Because the disposables just came out. The disposable syringes just came out, but they weren't sure they were going to be available for everybody. Crazy. I call it the dark ages.
Tracy, I know you said you were diagnosed when you were 17, but is it something that they picked up on because you had been going through something for a while, or had you lived with it and not known what it was?
I was sick for about 4 months. Every day you could see me I was a varsity tennis player. I've always been athletic, but every day something would get worse and worse and worse. And my parents, my mom kept taking me to the doctor saying something's terribly wrong with her. They ran every test in the world and they said, it's all in your head. And I'm like, I'm losing weight. I mean, I had every classic symptom of juvenile diabetes, now called type 1. And they kept saying the same thing is there's nothing wrong with you. Well, my best friend and I were watching a TV show with Phil Donahue. Don't know if y'all are probably too young to know who does it.
No. We know some Phil Donahue.
And he had Mary Tyler Moore on. And she was talking about juvenile diabetes. And my best friend looked at me and she's like, Tracy, that's what you have. We were so excited because I kept thinking, oh, I've got it. I know what I have now. So being the strong-willed 17-year-old kid, I didn't even wait for my mom. I went with the rotary dial and was calling my doctor's office. And I said, I know what I've got. I'm telling the nurse. And she's like, you can't have it. Nobody in your family has it. And I'm like, I've got every symptom. You don't have it. Well, 2 weeks later, I'm in the hospital fighting for my life. So I knew what I had, but I didn't know exactly. But the last 2 days of my life, I really could not get out of bed without help from my parents. It was just horrific.
That's rough. Horrific. That's so rough. And I mean, to come from that to where you are now is, I mean, that must have been an amazing journey. How did you start advocating for yourself? Like, how did you really start to get out there and just beat a lot of the odds that obviously doctors or the Diabetics Association have been putting on us? What motivated you? What really pushed you through?
Well, because I'm still a strong-willed person, but and you kind of have to have when you have a chronic disease. But I actually went back to high school my senior year, and I got cut from the tennis team, even though I was a #1 returning varsity letterwoman, but they cut me because I was sick. And I'm like, I'm not sick. My pancreas doesn't work. I'm not sick. Exactly. Anyway, you can't play on the tennis team any longer. And so I'd start challenging the tennis players, knowing I was going to beat them. And right in front of the coach, beating them every time, or, most times. And then I started going to a local medical school library and I started researching. So all my friends are having fun as seniors in high school. And I'm researching everything I can about diabetes. And 42 years later, I still every day research everything I can about living healthy without diabetes because my life depends on it and so many others. But the turning point, and everybody has a turning point in their life. And my turning point was my very first outing with my friends. We were going to go to the movies and we were going to see Animal House. I mean, back in the day, it was in the movie theater.
Yeah.
Yes. And so my mom reminded me as I was running out the door, Tracy, remember you can't eat anything because back then it was all exchange diets. And so all my friends were getting popcorn, candy, and all that kind of stuff. And my turn came up and I asked the concession stand clerk so I could get a cup. So I could get a drink of water out in the fountain. And she looked at me like I was from outer space. And she said, no. And I said, I'll be glad to pay for the cup. And she said, no. And of course, we didn't have diet soft drinks back then at the movie theater. Tab had just come out and we didn't have bottled water. So there was nothing I could do except get a little drink of water. And I just wanted to be like the rest of the kids. And at that moment, I started bawling. I mean, the month of depression, I didn't know what was going on with my body. I was doing this all the time. We didn't have home blood testing machines, but now I know what I was doing. And I ran out to the parking lot and I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, why me? Why me? And I was sobbing. So I'm driving home and I got in my bed that night and I laid there sobbing. And I said, Tracy, you've got two choices. You can either be better or you can be bitter. What are you going to choose? And at that moment, at 17 years old, now 42 years later, I said, I'm going to be better. And every day I do something to be thankful and to be better because, every doctor I still meet today asks me the same questions. How are you alive and what are you doing? And I was the first, they think I was the first type 1 diabetic who had 2 healthy children went through the full entire pregnancies in the whole entire state of Texas.
Wow.
And in 1983, I gave birth to my first child, and he weighed 7 pounds, which was unbelievable back then. But I didn't even have a home blood testing machine until 1 month before he was born. We were still doing the urine test.
The urine test. Oh my gosh.
What? So before the blood testing, the strips, the little lancets, you had to do a urine test. That was,
that's all you did, and you could try to guess to see what your numbers, just kind of see where you were.
They gave you a window of what you could be, and then you would bolus off of that. It's bananas.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. And we didn't even have a sliding scale. So I was supposed to take the exact same amount of insulin every day, no matter what. I mean, again, this was the Stone Age. I mean, this was so long ago. It's gotten so much easier. But anyway, my children are healthy. And now I'm a grandmother. My grandkids are healthy. So that's what it's all about. And so I really started. Every decade, I do something huge to celebrate after my 20th anniversary of my diagnosis, because everybody said you're going to be dead. And again, I chose to be better and not bitter. And so I've always done something to show the world that I don't care what I'm going through. I'm doing it. So one year I did a triathlon because I'm afraid of water, and that's part of the triathlon. You got to swim, and I'm in the, getting, in the changing area and everything. I'm giving myself shots going, okay. My daughter's going, screaming, Mom, don't give yourself shots. I'm like, I'm super high. I mean, but you just do things like that. And, we go whitewater rafting down the bottom of the Grand Canyon. We hike, we backpack. I don't let diabetes get in my way. When you travel with diabetes, you carry your whole entire world with you, because without insulin, you die.
Yes.
But I've never looked at it to the point where I can't do anything. And so as my 40th anniversary approached, and I got so sick of my diabetes, I got so sick and tired of every doctor saying, how are you still alive and what are you doing? I mean, it's not rocket science. That's it's difficult. It's so hard to control. And I'm not saying it's not, but it's really not rocket science.
If you think about it, it's the only disease where we are our own doctors, like 90% of the time. So you're completely right. Not rocket scientists. It's common sense and being a badass.
And my endocrinologist I had the same endocrinologist until he retired and left me for 38 and a half years. And so he's the one that told me to write my first book, because he said, more about, he would have new endocrinologists just getting out of they'd graduate, they'd go through residency, then they'd go into their specialty. He would have them come meet with me so I could give them pointers and things like that.
Wow.
And again, I'm not the oldest person with diabetes, but I've had it for so long, and I'm pretty successful because I have no complications, and I've done really well. And I keep my A1Cs. Now, I don't like to say this too often, because I think people beat themselves up for A1Cs, and it's just a tool in our toolbox. But I've had A1Cs in the 5 for 4 years, 3.5, 4 years now.
Wow. Yeah. That's like being oh my God, A student upon an A student upon, like, she graduated with honors upon honors of the valedictorian. It's really good. And that's amazing. It really, really is. Because I know they've been talking about raising the A1C, because people, of course, have been having complications where it's either they're dosing themselves too much to produce the low numbers to get the lower A1C, or whatever the case. I wish doctors saw it not as a final grade. I wish doctors would look at it more as just a helpful info, and they don't. They base a lot on it, and that causes a lot of problems.
And I am so against it. So against it.
And totally. It's one of those things. It's not a one size fits all disease. Nope. Not everybody reacts the same way to the different insulins. I see you do low carb. So how, as somebody who loves her carbs, how do you feel like it's helped? How do you feel like it's improved numbers, or just the general overall diabetic sluggish feeling that I feel I wake up every morning with.
Well, and that's because I'm real close to being 60. I'm about this close to being 60, and I have more energy than I did in my 30s.
That's
And
great.
it's, I developed the mind, mouth, and move, the 3M formula: mind, mouth, and move. Mind, you got to have the right mindset, believe you're in control, because we are in control. Mouth, learn to eat to live, don't live to eat. And move, we got to get off our chairs and move more. But what the biggest thing for my life with diabetes has been is really understanding how the food impacts us, not just the way our blood sugars respond, but the energy levels. And so, and I'll get to your low carb question, but think about the last time, and this is even somebody without diabetes, you went out for pizza or Mexican food for lunch. And you're smiling, and I'm like, oh.
I know. I feel really bad.
No. I'm just teasing you, Michelle. I'm just teasing you. But what you don't, but then you go back to your office, and 2 or 3 hours later, you're yawning, and you're like, I got to take a nap. But then when I started changing that, and it all started for me with breakfast, because I was eating a healthy American breakfast. And once I got my blood testing machines and I was seeing this, I was doing this every single day. And it's like crazy. So what I started doing, again, I'm back in the medical school libraries researching, and I'm seeing what people around the world are doing. They don't eat what we eat. They're eating salads. They're eating like salmon. So I started always having extra salad. I'm a big salad person. I'm a big greens person. And so I would have that for breakfast. And then I'd start saying, about 10 or 11 o'clock, I'm looking at, my blood sugar, was still doing the finger sticks. And I'm looking saying, I haven't changed at all. And then by lunchtime, I still feel good. And then, because I do a lot of healthy fats. But then the lunch, so everybody's going out for pizza. And I thought, well, okay, I'll have a slice of pizza. And I go back 2 or 3 hours later, yawning. But then I started saying, I'm going to have a salad or something healthy for lunch. I do a lot of avocados. I eat nuts for my snack, those kind of things. I still eat carbs because carbs are in vegetables. I'm not like anti-carbs. I just don't eat things that are high glycemic because it spikes my blood sugar. And not only does it give me the bad numbers, but I feel horrible. And I want to be at 70, and I want to be able to say at 70 years old, I feel better than I did in my 30s.
That's awesome. It's amazing to listen to, because it's true. It's what we all hope. We all hope we can reach that age and not have the complications. And to read everything that you've done, you've written, you've been on TV shows with Dr. Oz. It's pretty amazing.
I heard you say something I really liked about deciding if you want to be bitter or better. How much does a positive mental attitude actually play into something like a chronic disease? Like, do you feel that just the positive mental attitude, if you have someone with the same symptoms, same type 1 diabetes, do you think someone with more positive attitude is going to be actually healthier? Do you think the mind affects the body that much?
I do. And people with diabetes are at greater risk of depression, number one. When you realize that and you say, okay, I've got to step up a little bit higher on that. But there's so much scientific research that shows how much, and also I have a psychology background. So obviously I'm going to say that about the mind. But when I realize how much our mind impacts, I could hit the snooze button and say, you know what? I don't want to go work out in the morning. Or this morning. But then I'm like, no, I want to work out. So you sit, instead of going to bed at night saying, I'm tired, I don't want to get up in the morning, I'm excited, I can't wait. I don't hit the snooze button because you're telling yourself I'm not worth it. So I get up in the morning and I work out. And so I'm like, I can do this. And the same thing with food. A great example of how the mind plays. Oh, this is so perfect. So when I was diagnosed, we run a very, very stringent diet. That's all I'm going to say. But one of my favorite things to do was eat hot fudge sundaes. I loved hot fudge sundaes. And so what I started imagining was I would visualize broken up glass and thumbnails or thumbtacks in hot fudge sundaes. I wouldn't want to eat it. So again, all my friends were all out. Everybody's having pizza and soft drinks, and I'm having a glass of water because that's all we did in 1978. And I'm thinking, oh, that pizza looks so good. Everybody wants to have pizza at 17, but I would imagine I don't want to gross anybody out, but I would imagine mice or rats running over the pizza and using the restroom on it.
Mm-hmm.
The mind does.
I'm not gonna lie, that's pretty awesome.
I think I've been to that restaurant. I really did.
No, but I mean, it's a good way to psych your mind.
Almost reprogram yourself.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Now,
it's pretty amazing.
I know a lot of people listening go, okay, it's easy to say, you made that choice one day, bitter or better. But I'm sure it wasn't that simple. I'm sure it wasn't bitter, better, and then your life was all sunshine and rainbows and unicorns. I know from speaking to Michelle, and my grandmother was a type 1 diabetic before she passed. And I know there are those days where you just feel like, why me? This is no fair. What kind of advice would you give to someone who just finds themselves alone and in a depression? Like, how would you get yourself out of those times?
What worked best for me, and again, I like to go back to my 30s because the 30s was the most difficult decade of my life, not just with diabetes, but just a lot of things were going on. My kids were still young and involved in things. I was tired all the time, and I changed my eating plans. But what I realized, and again, there's so much scientific, I would love to be able to put all the scientific research in the show notes and let everybody see it. But when you start getting depressed, and everybody gets depressed, I don't care who you are, you get up and you get a pair of tennis shoes on, or you just go for a walk. It doesn't cost any money, but exercise really does help reduce depression. I mean, it's crazy. And then watch what you eat, because when you eat that high glycemic foods, you're going to crash. I mean, everybody does, with or without diabetes. And it's that, okay, you go up and then you hit that crash. And that's when you're most vulnerable to depression and overeating, cheating, whatever you want to call it. But the depression is critical. And then I'm a big believer in meditation and prayer. I'm a big believer every day, at least, well, not every day, because I say about 4 days a week, I watch about a 5 or 10 minute video of somebody who is a positive person, somebody like a Tony Robbins. There's all those kind of people out there. I like to read a lot of positive books because you've got to keep thinking about what's important. And we can look down the rabbit trail and think about all the horrible things that's going on in the world. I was going to ride my bicycle this summer from Canada to Mexico, but with COVID, that changed. Yeah. And at first I was really down in the dumps. And then I thought, you know what, Tracy, it's not your year. You can do it another year. But it's, I've had a lot of experience. Like I said, I'm almost 60 and I've been living with this for 42 years, but it's been difficult off and on. I did want to get cut from the high school tennis team because that was something that I was very passionate about. I had a lot of trouble my freshman year of college because my blood sugars were all out of the way. My roommate, she'd eat the food, my snacks in my refrigerator. And then I'd say, I need that to live. And didn't matter. I mean, and then people, I got kicked out of rock concerts because I had syringes with me. I mean, I can go through the whole thing. I was wearing an insulin pump one time. This was like maybe 10 years ago. And TSA was not going to let me get on the airplane without taking my insulin pump off.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, I can't. I'm going to, anyway. So, then you start getting like, I just wish, everybody's like, oh, what would you like? I wish one day without having diabetes. But then I'm like, but you know what? I may go back to being my old self and not be thankful for what I have. Because when you can literally wake up and say, I'm alive. I have another day of life. I have so much to be thankful for. And those days that I do get depressed, I journal. I journal a lot. I put Post-it notes up. I tell myself, Tracy, you're worth it. You can do this, because I didn't have the hope. And that's what I always try to tell people: without hope, you have nothing. And that's why I've always volunteered at diabetes camps. I've always gone and talked to parents of children with diabetes, because we all have to have hope. And you can work around the depression, because the depression is rampant in the diabetes community. Well, actually in the world, but especially with people with diabetes.
I think the burnout is the worst part with a lot of diabetics. You just get to the point, you've dealt with it. You've gone round and round for so long. You've done the happy smiley face, and then it's just like, boom, and your world breaks.
Well, something that we always ask, kind of like when people are talking to pilots, what kind of equipment you pushing? What kind of equipment do you? What kind of equipment do you have going for you over there, Tracy?
Oh, it's so amazing. This is so amazing. All right, so can I give company names, or do I need to just?
Of course.
Okay, so now I just recently changed to Tandem T-Slim. And I wear Dexcom 6. I've worn Medtronic, I've worn Omnipod, and now I'm wearing T-Slim. I've done Dexcom. I love the system I have now, where you can go to bed at night, and if you do start dropping low, your blood sugar, your insulin stops,
that.
And it's like you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh, I didn't know that. And it's so much easier for me because, like I said, I'm very active. We backpack, we hike, I'm a runner, I'm a bicyclist. And so I'm not married to my diabetes like I used to be.
I really wish companies like that would treat type 1 diabetics more like athletes. Like someone would just come knocking on your door and be like, we're sponsoring you. We want you to wear all our equipment. We're going to cover all the bills for it. We're going to have you wearing Dexcom jerseys everywhere you go. But just for someone like you who went from the time when it was basically self-urine tests to check your diabetes to, hey, let's show you how to boil needles because we don't know how long these disposable ones are going to be around. What do you feel like the technology is for dealing with diabetes has been progressing at a steady pace, or do you feel like it's behind, or they could be doing better, or are you happy with the progression?
I think probably the last 10 years, I think technology has gotten much better. I think that we could have gone a little bit quicker. I think if there were more of us with type 1, I think that we'd be receiving a lot more a lot more people saying we need to help these people. But the cost is what's just frightening for people. After my ride across the United States, I started a foundation for children with type 1 diabetes who couldn't afford technology. And so it's just, I get goosebumps just talking about the kids.
That's amazing. That's really
amazing. The stories that these parents are sharing with us. It's just, anyway, it's amazing. But that's one thing is, insulin, insulin prices are just, I call it liquid gold. It's just sad. And it's sad that so many people are having to choose between insulin and eating, or insulin and living. And that's not right. I'm not political at all, but I just feel like, I think the technology we're moving leaps and bounds now. But I think if we could just get the pricing under control. Now I know Medicare recipients are just now going to they have a cap on the insulin, which is wonderful. But I wish we could have the cap for all people with diabetes under the age of 65. But anyway.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's not a political thing. It's making a life-saving medication that you can't say, okay, I'll push that off a couple of days before I have to take it. You don't. And you're in the hospital costing you hundreds of thousands of dollars of however much money, or you die. Like, we don't have much breathing room.
And it was brought to my attention by a couple of people we've had on the show. I never even thought this would be an issue, but when it comes to insurance companies, they don't really differentiate type 1 and type 2. They just label you a diabetic and go, here's your strips and your lancets. And it's become so clear the more of these that we do, is that it's almost like a different disease, type 1, type 2. Like, it's easy to call them both diabetes, but the level of care that you need with the type 1 and the level of care you need with the type 2, it seems ridiculous that by this point someone hasn't stepped in and said, look, no, we're not going to give a Dexcom to every type 2 guy who doesn't want to work out and watch what he eats. But for someone who needs to check more than 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day, yes, we should have the most up-to-date equipment on them so they can self-monitor themselves. And even from an insurance, just dollars and cents standpoint, just paying for someone's Dexcom or giving them a reduced rate, you're going to make your money back if they don't have to be checking into a hospital every 2 months. I mean, I understand, but I just don't understand why this hasn't been an issue that's been taken care of yet. Because it seems like we have We have everything in place to do it if we wanted to. Right now, Michelle's going through something where her insurance covers the way to dispense her insulin, but not the cartridges that fit with that dispenser. And that just seems like someone in a room somewhere who knows nothing about any of these products going, we'll cover this, but we won't cover that.
And it's the same insulin, which is what kills me. Like the exact same insulin that I can take in a disposable pen, I have now in a Wi-Fi enabled pen. So it keeps track of it and I can send files to my doctor. Great thing. It also tells me how much insulin I have on board, like a pump. And they won't cover the cartridge. I'm like, so you cover the insulin, but you won't cover the storage device. No, we can't cover it.
Now, Tracy, you seem like a pretty direct person. Have you ever had issues or bouts with almost having to explain to insurance companies your needs and how to deal with things?
I still today. I mean, this is 2020, and I still have to explain it to people. I'm like, what is going on? I was able to go to our state capital in Texas, which is Austin, and I was able to speak to our legislature about the importance of helping people, especially children. My heart is for children because,
they can't
with type 1
for themselves as well.
Yeah, and type 1, we didn't have a choice. I'm sorry. That's what the last phone call I had with somebody with my insurance company. They're like, well, it's really a lifestyle choice. If you would just exercise and eat healthy, you probably wouldn't have to take your insulin. And I said, I rode my bicycle 3,527 miles from San Francisco to New York City. I exercised. Didn't care.
That is not the problem.
but what's another problem that we still have with diabetes, and especially with insulin, why do we need a prescription?
Exactly.
Hello. So I'm in California on an 18, this is not my bike ride, on an 18-day adventure trip with a bunch of people. I didn't even know. I mean, just 4 vans of adventure people. And my insulin went bad. I always carry extra insulin, but because of the elevations and the heat, anyway, it went bad. So I told one of the drivers, I said, hey, there's a Walmart. Let me just run in real quick and get my insulin, and then I'll be ready to go. Give me 5 minutes. Sure, no problem. I went in, and the pharmacist said, I can't give you this. You got to have a prescription. I'm like, it's insulin. Because I always, anyway. And I said, what do I do? I'm type 1. I'm going to die. And he's like, because by this time my blood sugar is already up in the 400s because I've been we were out in the wilderness for a day and I was trying to, anyway. And so he said, go to the hospital. They'll give you insulin. Go to the emergency room. And I'm like, I'm going to have to spend $3,000 to check into an emergency room. Anyway, there's so many stupid things like that. But every time I talk to anybody at the insurance company, 95%, not every time, 95% of the time, it's they're saying, have you thought about eating healthier? Have you thought about exercise? And I'm like, think about it every day. Thank you.
May I side note that both times I have called my insurance, this is the first time it's ever happened to me, so I need to make a note of it. I have talked to the 2 nicest freaking people in the entire building. I can't yell at you when you're just trying to be helpful. You can't really help me as much as I want, but you're so nice.
I would just love for Tracy to go down to the insurance company and be like, look, I'll put my workout schedule and what I had for lunch today against you. All right.
Exactly. Let's go head to head.
Just because, after you have 5 healthy choices in a day, they're not healthy choices anymore. Okay.
I'm going to quote you on that one.
Fair enough. But yeah, it's just amazing to me at just the difference between type 1s just case by case. You can't even lump type 1s in together because hearing your experiences with Michelle's experiences, like Michelle actually went through and did the implant surgery. What was it, 3 years ago?
It was an eyelid transplant cell. Oh God, it was 2015 when I got my first one. That one ended horribly because of bunnies. Second one was 2017. So God, it was 3 years ago. I forget what year it is. But yes, it was 3 years ago.
So just seeing how it affects people differently, and
it's insane.
You both have the same type 1 diabetes, but just seeing the difference in lifestyle and everything else, it amazes me.
And you don't get time to talk to people. I don't know, maybe Michelle, you're different, but the doctors are busy. They don't have time. The diabetes educators are busy. They don't have time.
They give you pamphlets. You get a lot of pamphlets. I mean, tons of pamphlets. Well, that's all you get.
I've only talked to you for half an hour now, Tracy. I imagine once legislators see your face and they see you walking into the room, they're like, just write her a check. We don't have time to argue with her today.
With fear.
She's right, and she knows more about all this than us. So let's just.
And mark me if I'm wrong. When I was on your website, I was reading. You had read something at that point, over 3,000 different medical articles about diabetes. And I mean, this was just whenever you had developed your site. So, I mean, you say you go back constantly. I think that's great. I think keeping up with the latest things is something that we all need to do. We need to be better informed.
It's more important with the internet. Of course, when I was diagnosed, we didn't have the internet, but it's so important to make sure it's scientifically based, it's research, and it's got, education behind it and stuff. Because I can't tell you, I'm sure, Michelle, you're the same way. How many people have told you to say, hey, take this magic pill and you're cured? I mean, there's no cure.
In cinnamon. It's always
we talk about it every episode. We ask people, what's the miracle cure they've heard? And some of it is cinnamon comes up. Apple cider vinegar comes up. Pumpkin cinnamon. Pumpkin seeds. I'm sorry. So
flax seeds.
Tracy, with the organization or the charity you started, what do you feel that a child being diagnosed with type 1, what do you feel that should be the minimum that they need to have to actually, I don't want to say be productive, but what do you feel to make their life easier they should all be equipped with?
I think an insulin pump and a continuous glucose monitor. Because we all, even as adults, we don't want to be different. And these poor little kids, and I'm going to tell you a story about Hayden. And I met him, and his mom has already given me permission because I've talked about him for years now, or 2 years now. But I met Hayden on my bicycle ride across the country. Sarah, his mom, I had more parents reaching out to me because I did a lot of social media saying, oh man, this is changing our child's life. We're all watching you ride across the country. Well, Sarah reached out to me one day. She says, are you going to be in Chicago? And I'm like, yes. And she said, well, we live like an hour and 45 minutes away from Chicago. Could my son and I come up and have dinner with you? And I said, sure. So we made the plans and everything. Well, Hayden walked in. At that time, he was 8. And he walked in carrying my little book because he's telling everybody, I'm going to meet her. She's got diabetes just like I do. He had never met anybody with type 1 diabetes. And so we started talking. And at this time, he had had diabetes for 2 years. So he was 6 years old when he got it. They were waking up every 2 hours every night to check his blood sugar. And because children in the United States die at night more than any other time with type 1 diabetes. And they were exhausted. I mean, she never said one thing about being tired or I wish this didn't happen to him.
You can see it.
But they kept seeing. And so the next day I'm on my bicycle pedaling and I'm thinking, and plus we had lost a little girl, not that I knew, but I saw on social media, a 9-year-old little girl spending the night at her best friend's house and never woke up that night. And so I'm sitting here thinking about that little girl, thinking about Hayden, thinking, if not me, then who? Who's going to do this for these kids? And then the same people that said, well, you can't ride your bike across the country. You're too old. You have diabetes. Were the same people saying, you can't start a foundation. And I'm like, why not? I mean, if not me, then who? So,
watch me.
But the Hayden was the very first recipient of our, he got a continuous glucose monitor.
That is so cool. And that is awesome because you're basically Hayden's Mary Tyler Moore. You're like, Hayden got to see you and be like, look, she's famous and she's just like me. And I don't have diabetes. And just looking at your website makes me feel like I haven't done anything with my life. And I've had the opportunities. I have a bike in the garage. I have a working pancreas. And you're making me look bad. You really are. You're making me look horrible. But that is so awesome. And, I know you're doing it for the kids. Are you allowed to say the name of your organization in case we can get some people donating to it?
Oh, I'd love to. It's called Diabetes Technology Advocacy Foundation.
I love
it. Michelle, I sent you the information.
Yep, and I got the details, so we'll make sure we put it in here so that we can let everybody know. I mean, because like Mike and I always say with this podcast, it's about spreading knowledge. It's about connecting with people, and it doesn't even. We're at one point we're going to have type 2s on here, but so far, I mean, it's opening people's eyes to what we go through, what we can achieve, of course, is very important. But I think they need to hear more from us. There's not enough of a voice out there for us yet. And so it's really nice to see someone like you and go on your website and look at your 5 books.
Well, that's what the ride started off was to celebrate, and I say celebrating air quotes, my 40th anniversary of my diagnosis. And so when I left, we had to buy an RV, which was very expensive so my husband, I was just going to pedal across the country. And then my husband's like, what are you going to do with your insulin? I'm like,
okay, I was going to ask you that.
Okay, I've got a plan. So anyway, so he's working from the RV. So he did all the work. I just got to ride my bike. But so I had to have an insulin, my insulin had to stay cold and everything. But when we were leaving Fort Worth is where we live. And I said, if we can inspire one person, this whole trip is worth it. And I never realized that how many people still today with diabetes don't ever get hope from anybody. So I became the hope and health advocate for people with diabetes. And it kind of stuck with me. I've done a lot of TV appearances, not just for the ride, but for my books and stuff, because I have such a unique story, because I don't live like a normal person. I don't have a pancreas that works, but I don't also live as a normal person. But every newscaster, every reporter, every photographer, every cameraman have always come up and said, I know somebody, or I just found out I have type 2 diabetes. Yeah. And so I spend an hour and a half talking to these people saying, do this, do this, do this. Call me and we'll talk through it. Because there's so much things, even with type 1, type 2 pre-diabetes, if we don't lose hope, we can take control. But Mike, it all starts with mind. I mean, it all goes back to the mind, because synergistically, they all work together, mind, mouth, and move. And it's just incredible, the energy I have at almost 60 next month. But
I mean, you're rocking it. I mean, absolutely. No. I mean, I hope I am I can't promise that's a lot of biking. That's a lot of biking. But it gives someone like me something to hope for, that, I can keep up with things. I can hopefully have a very long and active life, watching my beautiful, healthy daughter grow up and things like that. So I commend you on that, because I think it's a great step that you've taken.
Well, we got just a few minutes left, and thank you so much. You've obviously been one of our favorite guests so far, and that's why I love it.
You say that every time.
Well, and every time I mean it, to have someone like you on here just sharing your story and your achievements and what you're doing for others. I think you're right. I think there's not enough people out there talking about it, because I've learned so much just in the short time I've been doing this with Michelle. And I lived with Michelle at one point. I lived with my grandmother my whole life. My mother has type 2 diabetes. I worked at a place called Liberty Medical, which we took care of. Do you remember?
Yeah, much hate for that.
I'm sure you know. Yeah, my good friend Wilford, with the diabetes. But I've learned more now from talking to 4 or 5 people with diabetes than I did in the 2.5 years I worked for that company selling the medication. And I think that says something right there. I'm qualified to be the one to talk to your doctor at that job. I could talk to your doctor and talk to you and ship you your house. But basically, I think I prove I don't know anything I was sending out. I was matching numbers and names, not knowing what anything does. I mean, I'm literally the problem, is what I'm saying. Or I was the problem. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, and we do have just a couple of minutes, but it's come up now from a good friend of mine started doing it, and he's having great success with it. I'm trying to talk my dad into doing it, because he's got a bunch of surgeries coming up, and they're trying to make him lose weight for his surgery, and that's never been his thing. But I've heard about it in the past couple of years, and I saw it pop up on one of your podcasts, intermittent fasting. And is it something that you're practicing now, or is it just something that you've thought about or you've discussed? Or could you, I just feel like I'd be wasted not asking you while you're here, if you could just give me some insight on it.
Yes, I do practice intermittent fasting, and I also do 24-hour fasts. But let me say, if you have diabetes, you should not do this unless you get approval from your doctor.
Yes.
I mean, but my doctor hates me. I don't know which way to say it because my doctor has me call, but she has to talk to a lot of her patients because I'm different. But I started intermittent fasting because I was fascinated with it. And I'm always practicing guinea pig. I like to know what's going on with my body. What's so amazing for me is that once I started truly practicing intermittent fasting, I was able, after my fast was over, I was able to lower my basal rates. Now, I don't ever recommend anybody on insulin doing it because it's very challenging. But what I love about intermittent fasting is you can stop at any time. So I've always said, okay, if my blood sugars drop, my fasting is over. And when I do my 24-hour fast, I stop, my insulin's over. And I've also done a 5-day Prolong. I don't know if you've heard of Prolong. I interviewed with Dr. Walter Longo, who's a researcher to the extreme with diabetes and cancer. And I was able to get him on my podcast, and he created this 5-day, it gets into autophagy in day 2, 3, and 4. No, 3, 4, and 5. I'm sorry. And autophagy is what we want because it removes the dead cells. And 24 hours, you can't do that. And the longest before this I'd ever done is a 36-hour fast. But I love it. I look forward each week when I do my fast because I feel so much better and I have more time and I save money. But I do not, again, please, if you don't hear anything else, I don't recommend anybody with diabetes doing it. But it works wonders for me.
But yeah, I mean, it's if that works for you, that's amazing. I would have never. I've looked into intermittent fasting, and I've always wondered. Of course, the question is, what happens if your blood sugar goes low, being a type 1? So thank you for answering that. But yeah, I think that's a really wow, 5 days.
But it's a specialty. It's all formulated, so you're getting about 800 calories a day. But it's all very scientifically proven. And Dr. Longo was going to Italy to do some stuff for children with type 1 diabetes. He's really into researching.
Wow.
But I don't know because of COVID. Everything's changed with COVID.
Yeah.
But they even said don't do it. Prolong even told me because I called and I said I want to try this, and they're like, do not do it if you got type 1 diabetes. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try it anyway. Are you gonna sell it to me? And they're like, okay. But anyway, it is amazing what I have discovered because for me, especially with diabetes, you have to eat certain amount of times, certain times of the day and certain snacks and everything. And I realized for me, eating was more of a mind thing and not I wasn't hungry. So now I've really learned with fasting and especially intermittent fasting, hey, I don't need to eat. If my blood sugars are fine, who says I have to eat meals? So anyway. Yeah. But don't do it. Don't do it if you have diabetes.
I will make that quite clear. I will make that quite clear. But thank you so much for that. Well, guys, I could, Tracy, honestly, I could listen to you talk for another 5 hours. I'll probably go right off here and listen to your podcast anyways, because I was scrolling through and just some of the topics look so just positive and motivational. And that's like you were talking earlier. I'll do that too. I'll go on YouTube and I'll just pull up motivational just speeches and lectures and just when I'm driving to gigs. And it's true. It changes your whole, when you get out of the car, you get ready to take on the world. I
watch puppy videos. I watch a lot of puppy videos.
Same thing.
I'm not going to lie.
But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this episode of Dying with Diabetes in America. If you get the chance, you know what? Not even you make time. Go check out TracyHerbert.com. There you'll find the links for her podcast, Your Diabetes Breakthrough with Tracy Herbert. And you'll find her books. Of course, she has 2 bestsellers out already, Diabetes, Tragedy or Triumph, and Ride of Hope. And Tracy, thank you so much for taking a little bit of time and spending it with us and giving us all your insight today. It has been so appreciated.
Thanks. It was fun.
Okay. Michelle, anything you want to say before we're out of here?
No. Well, wait. So, Tracy, what's the craziest thing you've ever heard to cure your diabetes? We didn't do the question.
The craziest thing? Well,
craziest thing.
Aloe vera. Drink aloe vera juice.
Oh,
aloe vera?
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that.
Well, there we go. We figured it out. All right, Tracy. Again. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to have you back on soon, and good luck with everything. I can't wait to see what you do for the next anniversary.
Thanks so much.
All right. Take care.
Bye.